Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Well, hello and welcome back, folks, and a happy new year to you all. I hope you and yours had a great time and you're all keeping healthy and well, and that all your wishes, dreams and hopes for 2022 come to reality. And it's nice that you've come to see us today. We're in keeping with our usual thing. We're talking about different ways of gaining independence, different ways forward, involving people from different parties and no parties. And today, I'm actually absolutely delighted to welcome for the first time to the show Chris Hanlon of the SNP Policy Development Committee. You've probably all been reading a wee bit about him, but here he is himself. Chris, welcome and thank you for joining us. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to yourself, Roddy.
I hope you haven't got a hangover or anything now. I hope we've not got you at a bad time.
No.
Fine. Well, you've been in the news this week, young man. You put your head above the parapet, which is not always advisable, but you've taken a bit of a beating and a thumping, but that won't happen to you here for sure. We just want to chat to you about it. But you've been taking it from all sides, including your own side. I see one of your members of parliament even said that you were our friend Mr. Wishart, who said that you were only elected because of people of the Alba party somehow or other get into the SNP to elect you, which was a tad nasty of him, because you dared to question. Well, on here we do love to do that. We've talked about different franchises, about plebiscites, about referendums, and I think this is a great thing to decide and talk about. So let me start. Was this discussed at the policy committee meeting?
Oh no, goodness, no. This is all entirely my own personal opinion.
Right. So sometimes giving your personal opinion is not the best advice thing. So how did it come to? I mean, getting a front page on the National. I mean, that is something. How did it start? Had you sent in a letter and they came back to you or what?
Yeah, well, I wrote a piece on sort of first thing on New Year's morning because it was just one of those. It was that sort of time of the day, time of the year. You're like, what's going on? And stuff had been going on in the background. So I sat down, I wrote this piece. It's a long letter. And I sent that in. What do you think? And then the next thing I know, it's on the front page. So, you don't have a huge amount of control over what happens once you send something in to a journalist, unfortunately. So.
Did they not come back and warn you that was going to be on the front page?
Certainly not that it was going to be on the front page, no.
So did you then think, well, I better talk to Edinburgh, I'll be getting my knuckles wrapped here?
No, well, I mean, I don't hold any sort of position anymore where really that's, an issue that I shouldn't be, And, it was a speculative piece. It was a think piece about, how I think, popular sovereignty interacts with, the idea of self-determination. So it wasn't about party policy. It wasn't discussing what party policy is or isn't or should be. It was just talking about, the actual issues that are underlying this discussion, which is one that had become over the last couple of weeks a live debate. I suspect, having looked at it, at the instigation of a few, possibly unionist actors, actually.
Yeah. Was there anything, the press being the press, was there anything in the article that you thought, wait a minute, I didn't say that, I didn't back that up? Or was it
no, that was
just as you said, everything was.
I suspect, as journalists are wont to do, they like to make a drama out of a crisis, as they say. So, perhaps the headlines were a little bit more than, as we have learned over the years, it's important not to, ignore the headline and read the last paragraph. Although,
for sure.
I suspect a lot of people over the last few days have not bothered to do that. Certainly, the sort of feedback that I've been getting has often been. I've often found myself thinking, "Did you read this article? Did you read any of this article? Do you understand the words that were on the page?" That's the nature of the beast, I suppose.
I get it myself regularly with the blogs I put out. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? So you got something, why do you want us to invade Russia, Chris? You go, what?
Well, Peter Bell was talking about this today. In fact, he intentionally wrote a controversial headline to see just how many people are going to read far enough through the article to actually pay any attention to what he was trying to say. So, partly saying, the headline is not.
I mean, I use it to hook people in with my stories. And I remember one time I actually did one where I said, the referendum in 2014 was rigged, and that was to get their attention. And I said, blah, 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 this is no. And so then the first comment I had at the bottom was, my wife and I have always believed that. You didn't read the rest, did you? Anyway, so this went out, a storm, and that's the only way to describe it, a storm erupted. And did HQ come along and say, you should have run this past us first, and
No, I've not heard anything from HQ about this, because it's not. It's not really treading on anybody's toes. It's not saying SNP policy is X, Y, and Z, or should be X, Y, and Z. It's talking about the principles of self-determination and popular sovereignty, and the sort of logical, rational conclusions of holding those sort of philosophical positions.
Yeah. I really want to delve into it because I really want to talk about that. But just to finish this off, just so we can get rid of all the myths, that you personally do not believe in DevoMax. You're not. You're not flying a kite on behalf of the party, which you've been accused of doing.
Far from it.
You're not testing the ground.
Far from it. I mean, as you've seen from the response, I mean, I've had a chance to glance over Michael Russell's piece today in the National, and he makes a pretty comprehensive case against DevoMax, and I can't say that I disagree with much what he says there. Although, again, to some extent, I don't think he's really read the article in as much depth as he could have done, or hasn't quite grasped everything that I said. But that's we're all busy. So.
Well, actually, I believe debate's a great thing, and that's what we try to promote here. And I have been pushing, and I think, and this is not a go at the SNP per se, absolutely not. But the fact that Angus Brendan has not been able to get Plan B put onto conference, and the party's not been able to get debate, I think is not good. And I think it's a good thing that we should debate. And that's why I personally believe in an independence convention of some kind, where we can talk about DevoMax, we can talk about plebiscite, we can talk about referendums. Now, I don't think this is the way forward. But if that's what a convention decides democratically, then hell, that's the way we're going. I don't think they would. Do you?
No. Actually, Gordon McIntyre Kemp wrote a good piece in the National yesterday about this that actually I think pretty much hit every single one of the points I would make about that. I think that ship sailed for the vast majority of the Scottish people. And I think for those that are left that still think it's a good idea, I think actually in the white heat of a referendum campaign, where that was a live issue in the debate, it wouldn't take long for them to get to the point where they realised that actually, no, they didn't agree with that anymore, because, the circumstances have changed. We're not in the EU anymore, and that, is a material change that changes the balance. And I think when you actually examine what DevoMax could be in that situation, I don't think it's well, Michael said it today as well, in pretty much the same words. It's no longer the option it was 7 years ago.
No, that ship sailed. Was your motivation? Well, I want to put words in your mouth. Was your motivation to get this discussed, to get it dismissed, if it was discussed, and to get it put out the way of any future, so it didn't come into a future referendum? Partly,
I think. I mean, it wasn't that intentional, but like I said, there was some discussion came up a couple of weeks ago. I kind of tried to troll back through the records to find out what got it going in my head, and it was sort of the second week of December. There was a couple of people talking about it, and I think there was a piece that Craig Murray wrote as well. And essentially, it was coming out of nowhere. And as far as I know, it was all, assertion without evidence. There was, it was all made up out of whole cloth. And I'm sitting thinking, well, why is this coming up? Why is Kenny Farquharson talking about DevoMax left, right, and centre? And so I wanted to frame the debate. I wanted to get it out in the open and frame it in the way that suited us, rather than suited our opponents, which kind of seemed to be the way it was heading. So, that's why I wrote the piece that I did, and, framed DevoMax in the way that I did, paired it right back to its essential elements and what I thought was the essential minimum. Because DevoMax, what does it mean? What does it mean? Wow. Everybody's has a different story. Everybody has a different version. Look at George Galloway and his Devo Supermax rubbish. It's a spectrum. And so I wanted to say, right, well, you've got this spectrum. This is DevoMax. What's at this end? What's the absolute minimum that you need for DevoMax to be something that's acceptable? And, that's what I wrote about in the piece.
But when you've got people like Kenny Farquharson backing you, it doesn't help you with the yes.
I suspect he's not backing me at all. I suspect
he was backing him on the spot. But, I guess if people sticking the boot in. But let's just play devil's advocate for a wee while here on DevoMax. You've actually touched on a very important point. What is it? I mean, is it full fiscal autonomy, everything except defence and foreign policy? Is it is it the vow that we should have got, that we were promised in 2014? What is DevoMax?
Well, see, that's what I was trying to get to, because there's so many things it could be. How many, so many powers that you could give the Scottish Parliament, so many different ways you could define it. So, what's the absolute minimum it could be? And I don't think you need any more powers, particularly over any particular area. There's lots of areas you could have powers over, energy, immigration, all sorts of stuff. But really, it's the power to add more powers. And it's the power to stop the attrition, to say, no, you can't take powers away from this Parliament. It's permanent. This is what you promised before, and you're now eroding its power. It has to be made permanent. It has to be constitutionally impossible for Westminster to take powers away, or to circumvent it, or go around it, or, all the things they're currently trying to do. And you have to be in a position where it's up to Holyrood on its own. It doesn't have to go cap in hand to Westminster and say, oh, please, sir, can we have some more powers? Maybe could we have a little bit of immigration, please, pretty please? That should be something that's up to the people of Scotland, who are, after all, sovereign. So, I think that would be your minimum level of additional power. It's saying, right, Holyrood has the power to go to the Scottish people and say, do you want the immigration? And if they say yes, then that's it done, because they're sovereign. So if they've said yes, it's done. Doesn't need any further interaction with Westminster. And that's why I think it's the sort of minimum. And do I think that's possible? Do I think that's feasible? I think if you squint at it just right, I think it is possible. Whether it's feasible, whether it's practical, whether it's something that Westminster would ever countenance, probably not. And that's what I was saying there. Kenny Farquharson probably does not support what I wrote. He will try to spin it like he does. But when it comes right down to it, if I say, right, so you're supporting A, B, and C, and the answer will be no. Because as GrouseBeater spotted pretty much straight away, when I showed him what I'd actually said, well, that's just independence. It's this. Yes, it's the level of independence that the Faroes has. So the Faroes voted for independence, but they never quite left Denmark. But they can leave anytime they like. They can ask for any additional powers they want anytime they like, and they are granted, because they're in that position. They have that Devo min-max position where they can leave. They can't have any additional powers, and Denmark is not in a position to take any powers away from them or to circumvent them in any way.
Well, the difference is the Faroes are dealing with Denmark and not London.
Well, that's also true, but that's another story. Yeah. That's another thread to it.
Absolutely.
It's a bad actor that's not willing to obey the rule of law.
Yeah, because from the day that devolution was granted, like anything, any social policy, anything that changes, the Tories have always opposed it. And they've virtually got rid of the welfare state in the UK, or certainly in England. All that's left really now is the Scottish NHS, which is going to go soon. They'll get it if we keep going on down the trajectory we're on just now. But anything that gives Scotland more power, e.g. gives England less power and less ability to steal our resources and wealth and young men to fight their illegal wars, They're never going to vote for it. They're never going to agree to it. You couldn't get, you and I could sit here and say, well, I don't think that's DevoMax, Chris. I think you need to get DevoMax. You must also have broadcasting. And well, I don't think so. We could argue here all day, or debate all day about what is DevoMax, but nothing that lets them give anything away, as we're seeing with the internal market bill. We're seeing what they've done with the Seoul Convention. They're never going to agree to it anyway, are they? So let's just kick it into the touch.
Well, I think that was kind of the point I was trying to make, was to say this is the minimum that DevoMax has to be called DevoMax. And the fact of the matter is, all these people that are trying to drum that up right now, Kenny Farquharson and elements of the Tory party and the rest of it, and, the Labour Party as well, some elements, they're never going to agree to that minimum standard. Never, ever. And so, when it comes to it, hopefully, now that we've actually brought this to the fore and actually discussed it, what is DevoMax? Well, that's what DevoMax is at the very least. When they're trying to inject that into debate, we can look at what they're trying to inject and be like, no, that's not good enough. Sorry, sling a hook. And hopefully that will be useful because, now we have a much better, a much clearer idea of what we would consider DevoMax. And that ties their hands because we framed the discussion before they get there, which is clearly where they're trying to head.
Because Keir Starmer was coming out with a new union to keep Scotland in the union. I like that, keep, as if it's they already own us, to keep us in. So he was going to come up with something else. We've had the vow, we had the Murrayfoot vow from the record and Brown and the Three Amigos. They don't keep their word, as we've seen with Brexit. Even if you get an agreement with them, no, this is what DevoMax, they will break it. As soon as the first time it suits them to break the deal, they would break it. So I'm of the opinion, I think by reading, I don't want to, again, put words in your mouth, but from what you've said, you wouldn't be 100% happy with the DevoMax offering.
No.
You're an independent.
I mean, that's not what I want. I want independence. But I'm a popular sovereignty fundamentalist. I believe termination. And if that's not what people of Scotland want, if the consensus was that they would prefer to take it more slowly and to go with a DevoMax option, then I want to make sure that the option that's presented to them is DevoMax, that it's not some con, and that it's actually on the ballot paper, not like the last time where they kind of waved DevoMax around in a sort of undefined, vague conceptual sort of way, and then as soon as they got their no vote, it all disappeared. It would have to be explicitly defined. There would have to be acts, already written bills, ready to go in front of Westminster, well, in front of the Scottish and English parliaments, in reality, that would have to be immediately passed if there was a yes vote to that proposition. And of course, that's never going to happen, like you just said. The Tories and Labour are never going to agree to that. And I'm hopeful that what that will mean is it'll never come up. They're never going to.
So you say your motivation was to get rid of this. So it's off the table. We're now down to it's status quo or independence, and let's get all the other nonsense out of the way.
To a great extent. I mean, obviously, as well, I wanted to discuss the subject matter because I do genuinely think that it's something that the people of Scotland, as our sovereign, have the right to reject. You can't just say, oh, we don't want to put that on the ballot because we might risk losing because it's on the ballot. That's not how democracy works. If that's what the people of Scotland want, that should be what they get. And, frustrating their will by just covering your ears and going, la, 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 isn't democracy. It's not even remotely democracy. But that was more of a sort of theoretical discussion, more a sort of secondary intention.
Because you would have to get England to agree before you could go to the Scottish people and say, this is what it means, that's what it is, and that's what's going to be getting put to you. So you'd never get agreement. So it's dead in the water.
I think so.
But it is maybe something that should be discussed in a convention, in an independence convention, because this I believe that we need to get things moving, and I think the best way of doing that is by discussion. And the best ideas can come from different political parties, can come from Civic Scotland, can come from the public of Scotland, people in the yes groups. I think we need to get meeting and talking. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely, wholeheartedly. I think we don't do enough of that, and I've got plans to try and, because that's my area, is policy development. I'm very keen on that, and not just sort of try to promote policies that I personally prefer, but to try to get the whole Yes movement and the Scottish polity in general, much more interested in actually getting hands-on with the day-to-day of actually running their own country and deciding what it is they want out of their government. That's the reason why I pushed for a citizens' assembly, like, what was that, 3-4 years ago now, and that, I'm a huge fan of that sort of deliberative democracy, because I think actually when you go to the people, go directly to the people, actually you tend to find that they're a lot braver than politicians think they are, and politicians are themselves quite a lot of the time.
So now that the dust is settling, and I mean, as I say, I don't envy some of the things you've been getting said to you, and I can imagine what your Twitter feed must have been like, for example. Would you do anything differently? Are you sorry you put it out, or are you glad you put it out?
No, I think actually it's been a really positive experience. I think it's really gotten people to start talking again in a way they haven't been doing for a while. And while people's reaction to that particular idea has been pretty negative, fair enough. Sometimes you're wrong. That's fair enough. I can take that on the chin. Often people have been quite negative about things I didn't say because they didn't really read the article or didn't really understand it. But that's also fine, because again, it's stimulated discussion and people are actually starting to discuss, the sort of Scotland they want to live in and, how we're going to get there, because, these are all important issues. And actually, I think we're in a position now where it's pretty inevitable in the next 3 or 4 years. And it's important, really important, that we actually start to discuss and plan and take seriously the fact that we're going to have to do the work of becoming an independent nation in the next few years. It's not like, you just open up a Christmas present and ta-da, you're independent. It's a lot to do. So
are you confident there'll be a referendum for independence in 2023? Yeah.
I'm not confident it'll be 2023, because anything could happen with this pandemic, and really, I'm a bit of a I've been very much on the more cautious side throughout this whole thing, so much of what happened, with like the Kent variant from inside the NEC, and it's quite a responsibility. I wouldn't want to be sitting in the First Minister's shoes, I'll tell you that. So, things are very much, up in the air at the minute with that. And I agree very much with Michael Russell that, the campaign we ran in 2014, which, you'll recall, everybody loved so much because it was just so passionate, it was so intense, there was so much going on. You just can't do that. You just can't do that in the current circumstances. And we really need to, because if we're going to win, and going back to what Gordon McIntyre wrote yesterday, if we're going to win, we're going to have to persuade the soft nose and yeses in the middle there. And we're going to do that face to face. We're going to do that speaking to them and talking to them about their hopes and their dreams and their ambitions for an independent Scotland. And you just can't do that in the current circumstances. So I'm hopeful it'll be by the end of 23. But it will. It absolutely will be by 2026, because that's what we committed to.
Chris, if that's the case, how can we do Holyrood elections, council elections,
because those are a different thing. I mean,
well, it's still getting people to a polling station and to hear a story.
You didn't conduct the campaign for the Holyrood elections or the last council elections the same way as you conducted the referendum campaign in 2014.
It's either safe.
Did you do hundreds of town hall meetings during the last council elections with tens of thousands of people?
But you still do in the Holyrood campaign. That's what you do. We're able to do an online. You're able to do an online Holyrood campaign
all the time. Peter Bell keeps trotting that out as well. That, oh, well, we managed to have a Holyrood campaign, so we can manage to have a referendum. You go back and you look at what we did in 2014 and the passion and the... Oh, well, yeah, we did. only just, and we'll win the next time.
Well,
we'll win
I hope you're right.
But that was
you should maybe go over to Stu Campbell's website and get some free money then if you're confident we'll do it. But anyway, Chris, can I thank you very, very much for coming along here and giving us your thoughts. It's been greatly appreciated. And hopefully these Citizens' Assembly convention, whatever you want to call it, same thing. I hope we all meet and this and many other things are discussed. But thank you very, very much for your time today.
It was my pleasure, Roddy. It was good fun.
Likewise. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Well, folks, that was fabulous. We got to the bottom of that. We heard that Chris was saying what he thought, as opposed to some of the things people said he was thinking. I hope you found it informative. I'm going to go on now and talk to my compadres to see what they think. And I'm joined today by, of course, the Paisley Mohawk, by the Coatbridge Cavalier, but we have also got, as a special gift for you, because it's New Year, I have got the Edinburgh essayist, none other than Gareth, the GrouseBeater. Gentlemen, Happy New Year to you all. Lovely to see you all. We've lost one. We've lost the Coatbridge Cavalier. He's vanished.
Galloping off in the opposite direction.
Well, if we could, while we're waiting in Phil joining us, I'd just like to make an announcement here now. Our famous road trip we were going to do, the Prism road trip, Iain, after consultations and some medical advice, and with Omicron being the way it is, the first week in February, we have been told would not be the wisest time to do this. And as such, we have decided not to do an in-person tour of LACUs and YES offices with Prism. Sad. Reluctantly, we took that decision. And you were part of that decision, Iain.
Yeah. I think it's sensible. You know, even if we wanted to go out and risk it, I think audiences would be somewhat reluctant to go. You know, I'm quite sure we'd fill many a hall, Roddy. You know, it's postponed. What I was
going to say, what we can do, folks, is we will do some Zoom meetings. If you want us to do a Zoom meeting with your branches, your LACUs, we'd be delighted to do that. And hopefully later, you know, not much later, I'm hoping that, you know, some of the news coming through in Omicron says that this could be, you know, there could be some light at the end of the tunnel, but we shall have to see. So that done, moving on slightly, gentlemen, you all read Chris Hanlon's story and you saw the stuff on social media. You were even quoted, Gareth, by Chris there during my chat with him. What did you make of what you had to say there in person?
Yeah, you're asking me, Roddy?
Yeah. What have you got? You said in person. What did you make?
Well, I think DevoMax, in whatever shape or form it's put in front of voters, is appeasement of the opponents of Scotland's autonomy. It leaves us with a moral dilemma. You know, do we compromise? Or do we say to Westminster, no, you've had 300 years of proving to us that you're completely untrustworthy, you're unreliable. For colonialism to work, it requires a reasonably large body of the populace to be comfortable with it. And that tends to be the middle class. And DevoMax is attractive to the bourgeois because they don't really have to think too much about what rights, civil and constitutional, they don't actually have under any new power structure. So I thought that the whole DevoMax debate had been run into the ground in 2013, you know, just prior to the referendum. I mean, one of the most outspoken advocates of it was Leslie Riddoch. She did a lot of banging the table, saying a two-part ballot paper wasn't good enough. There was a whole section of Scottish society who would have been quite happy with just some more powers. Well, our opponents took note of that, and up popped the vow, courtesy of hapless Gordon Brown. And we saw what happened to that. As soon as it was handed over to the Smith Commission, and there was a round party committee of Labour, Tory and Lib Dems sitting on the committee with SNP, they just nixed, they just blocked every single power that was proposed until there was this sort of meagre little, dog's dinner left. And now, in the last year, we've watched major powers from Scotland completely removed, including membership of the European Union. So my attitude to anything that's called DevoMax is just appeasement, and we have to dismiss that. If you've struggled all your life for your country's liberty, and then you stand up and say, yeah, I'll take that half measure because it's all we can get. What you're saying is you're quite content that it's being imposed from above. It's being imposed by the opposition, whereas liberty comes from us. That's why the working class in Glasgow and Dundee voted overwhelmingly for independence. They looked at what they had and didn't have, and they quite correctly surmised that, well, we may as well vote for independence because it'll give us something that we've never actually had. We've got nothing to lose. And the middle classes in Edinburgh, my city, decided that they didn't quite want that. So those are the people in my city that England depends upon, that we want to be ersatz English. We're quite comfortable with it because we think we have all the freedoms we need.
Iain, what did you make of Chris? Do you
well, I mean, I think, I don't think he's stupid. So I think he's probably just quite naive, because, I mean, to sum up the DevoMax argument, all you need to do is go back to 2015 when the House of Commons voted huge majority to deny Scotland full fiscal autonomy. They're quite happy to spend year after year telling us we're subsidised. But when they could have voted to take us out that position and give us full control of our economy, they couldn't get into the division lobbies fast enough to vote it down, which tells you all you need to know about DevoMax. But I think the most interesting thing, and perhaps the most worrying thing about what Chris said, was the fact that no one, note this, no one in the SNP headquarters or in the SNP hierarchy have been in touch with him about it. Now, it's on the front page of a Scottish paper. It's dominated social media ever since it went out. And nobody, not one of them, could pick up the phone to speak to him to find out what was going on. Now, I mean, they're all collecting huge salaries, Is there no one that can dial his number to find out and get some sort of idea where he's coming from?
Well, it was bound to have the unionist press and politicians leap on it,
absolutely,
as a potential solution, to quieten the natives again for
Well, I mean, DevoMax has been dead for the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah. You've got to ask what's going on.
Well, people like me just triggered my insecurity.
Yeah, I mean, they must have been,
SNP don't know what the hell to do.
They must have been popping the champagne bottles at Labour headquarters, and I know all you need to do is take that one in the paper alongside with Nicola's recent statements about wanting to work closer with Labour. It doesn't take long to put 2 and 2 together and say there's something going on here.
Well, that's what I mean. Our party of independence that's grown indolent, lazy, and fat, and has not prepared a thing for independence, certainly not educated the population about what the benefits will be immediately to them as well as to the country. You just sit there and you watch and you listen to somebody saying, look, what about DevoMax? And you say, well, what is it? You know, what kind of DevoMax is it that you want to put forward? What do you think is the minimum? No, and exactly as Chris Hanlon said, nobody knows, which is why I question why he bothered writing an article on that. I'd rather somebody, Chris particularly, to write and say, here are all these shadow institutions we have not bothered to set up in time for Independence Day. I mean, you think of embassies around the world. We've not done that yet.
Yeah.
There's a whole plethora of things where we have to remove colonial power and intervention. Now, including the civil servants that are advisors to Nicola, we have to start now and say, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, this is what will happen. We've set that up already. We've got the central bank. We've done this. I mean, you can go on forever. None of that has happened. That's the objections that people feel about the SNP doing nothing.
Yeah, but I mean, there's some strange things happening, Gareth. You know, everyone that's involved in politics knows that coming April this year, there's going to be huge, absolutely huge rises in energy costs for everyone across Scotland. What are the SNP doing? I mean, a couple of years ago, they passed at their conference, they were going to set up a national energy company. And they were going to use Scotland's great strength, you know, to produce energy cheaply, and the benefit would flow to everyone in Scotland.
In our manifesto last year, we also pledged to explore the option of a new publicly owned energy company. The idea at its heart is simple. Energy would be bought wholesale or generated here in Scotland, renewable of course, and sold to customers as close to cost price as possible. No shareholders to worry about, no corporate bonuses to consider. It would give people, particularly those on low incomes, more choice and the option of a supplier whose only job is to secure the lowest price for consumers. We will set out more detail when we publish our new energy strategy, but I'm delighted to announce today that by the end of this Parliament, we will set up a publicly owned, not-for-profit energy company.
So just as we all know, there's going to be this huge increase coming, which is based around supposedly the need because fossil fuels are going up enormously. Here's Scotland sitting on top of this mountain of renewable energy, and the SNP choose this time to announce they're no longer going ahead with that proposal. I mean, that is just, I mean, it's got to be something more than just being strategically inept, which, I mean, I don't think there's any argument that they are completely strategically inept. Every time DevoMax comes up, the response should be from the SNP, well, go and get some bills passed on it at Westminster. Tell us what we're going to get. Have the legislation through there just to be ready implemented, and then we'll believe you. We'll know what's happening. Get them passed. So they're only just needing approval. They'll never do it. I mean, it's a majority of over 400 MPs against full fiscal autonomy. So there's no prospect of that ever arriving. But it kills it stone dead at that point, totally credibly. It's not a difficult thing to put down.
It's easy
Ian,
to say
that. Say to you and you, Gareth, the two of you know Alex Salmond very well. If someone in the ALPA policy development or the NEC was to go out with a policy that's not a ALPA party policy, how long do you think it would be, Ian, before Alec picked up the phone? Or
it'd be very quick. It'd be very quick, and rightly so. You know, rightly so, because you need to have something to grow. I mean, this scattergun approach.
He wouldn't pick up the phone. There'd be a knock on your door.
Yeah, probably. You know, but rightly so, because you need some discipline in a political party, and you certainly can't. I mean, people all over Scotland now are writing out their wee pet theories and sticking it into a letter to the National, expecting to be on the front page the next morning, you know, because it looks to me as if the National have been up to a few tricks here as well, you know.
The Herald's geezer, as I call him, Ulster geezer that spouts once a month, Neil Mackay, he's picked it up, and he pressed a long article about, yeah, let's have DevoMax on the ballot paper. So you see, the supposed friends of Scotland are really keen to sell us short.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a gift that should have been wrapped. The picture on the front page should have been Christmas paper with a bow around it. Here's something to help the unionist parties at the start of 2022.
Yeah. Because help the unionist parties out. They really don't want to be cruel and brutal to us. You know.
Gareth, isn't it a fact? As I touched on with Chris, DevoMax is undefinable. Because
isn't it that box of chocolates that you never know quite what you're going to get?
You open it up, exactly, because you can't. What Chris was advocating, I don't view as DevoMax. I mean, that's not how I view it. So, and you've got 5.3 million people. So it's a very difficult thing, Gareth, to encapsulate for a binary type choice, or even an STV choice.
Yeah, we don't need our independence back again. You know, there's a halfway measure. That's exactly what it's done. So I was very quick in putting it up on the front of my Twitter site for debate, and I put it up asking questions rather than denunciations. And one of the questions that I put to Chris Hanlon was, please tell me you're not flying a kite on behalf of the SNP. But I bet you there's some MSPs there sitting saying, well, this might be a good third way. I can even see Nicola Sturgeon sitting there saying, I can get some kind of independence as part of my legacy, as well as GRA and a hate crime bill and male, female and trans toilets and all that other sort of nonsense that she's got herself distracted by. So as I said earlier, it triggered my insecurity, and I'm the same as anyone else. So there must have been other people who felt the same way. You know, you've got uncertainties about whether the SNP are going to achieve anything, and then somebody comes up with a lollipop to suck, and that'll keep us quiet. I'll stop us talking.
Yeah, I mean,
Iain, could I say, wouldn't it have just been the thing I would have expected if Nicola Sturgeon had come out? Let's just for a minute suggest that they had no clue, they had no idea it was going to come out. All it would have taken was for Nicola to come out, call a press conference, the press would turn up, and say, I just want to make this clear. DevoMax is not an SNP policy. It's never going to be an SNP policy. We believe in independence, and I'm leaving it at that. That's it. And that's a story killed. That's it over.
The one thing that sorry, I beg your pardon, Roddy. The one thing that Chris is correct about was allowing a discussion, but it's like 4 or 5 years too late.
Yeah, but it took a few days for the SNP hierarchy, and it was only today where some of them, like Marie Todd, come out and they were really. It's as if they'd all got together and had been in a wee huddle and thought, how should we respond to this? They took too long to react, Iain.
Well, if I was a reporter in the press conference, I would have asked, well, will this be coming up the next time you discuss independence at your party conference, or will it still be in this decade? Because they don't discuss independence, they don't discuss strategy. Ordinary members are not empowered to even talk about it. They've spent the last 5 years keeping it off the party agenda, and here's Chris and his innocence banging this into the National, finding himself in the front page. And as you say, Roddy, there was no instant reaction. They wanted to see how we could do.
what we do know is that that Gordon Brown and Starmer are working together on some kind of federalism system. Yeah. And so are the DUP. So are the DUP separately from Brown with the far right of the Tory party. So there's not much difference between the two. They're both of them trying to end up with a federalism where they can say, look, Wales will be its own federal nation. England will have its own votes for English laws. Scotland too. And then what we'll do is we'll put another level of bureaucracy on top of that. We'll call it not a United Kingdom. We'll call it the Nations Assembly, which has veto powers. That's about the only way they can try and make any kind of devolution work. Everybody has to accept it.
Yeah, and the English won't.
The English won't. As soon as England being so much larger will dominate any proposal that comes forward. There is no way mathematically, given the numbers involved for each nation, that it can be any way equitable towards Scotland.
England will always be the exceptional nation. I mean, it's
absolutely. I mean, and anyone that gets involved in that, you know, they're conning people. They must know that that can be the only possible outcome. So why give it credence? And that's where I criticise Chris, because I think Chris got involved in an argument, you know, that's, as you say, Gareth, past its sell-by date. You know, that ship sailed the minute the vow was disowned. You know, nobody's going to believe in Scotland anything to do with promises. Well, and it all falls down the minute you say, how are you going to deliver it? England's Parliament's got to vote for this. The last time they tried to give us full fiscal autonomy, over 400 majority against. Are you telling me these folk are going to have changed their minds? They don't want to privatise Scotland's National Health Service. They don't want to, you know, use our resources. You know, they're going to give us this thousands of miles of the North Sea back. Don't kid yourself on. Don't waste your time. These people are merchants.
Wasn't it killed when we were taken out of the European Union? I mean, if devolution was set up for all the nations, is Scotland going to have the right to say, oh, by the way, we want back into the European Union?
Of course not. Of course not.
Okay, you see England say, well, yes, of course now, because you do have these freedoms, you have these powers to make these decisions.
Yeah, it's never going to happen. And I mean, I just can't get my head round why anybody with any intelligence in Scotland believes it possibly could. The maths don't stack up. The numbers are so different between the four parts making it up. It can only have one outcome. And if it hasn't got that, you can be damn sure the Westminster Parliament's never going to vote for it to make it happen.
Just to finish this part of the show off, because does this not, though, show, with one, the SNP not having any discussion on anything appertaining to independence, how to get there, you know, things to put in place, currency, bank, all that sort of stuff, borders, that there's an absolute need. My big hobby horse, which I'm pushing this year, Gareth, is to have citizens' assemblies, independence conventions, whatever you want to call them, where you call in the political parties, Civic Scotland, the institutions, and we start discussing what we want, how we want it, and how we're going to go about it. Do you not think this is a classic example of why we need it?
Oh yeah, I don't know Chris at all well, so there's no animosity in my my rejection of his ideas. Yeah, there's a lot of frustration around, and the only way we are going to be able to dominate the narrative, to create it, to keep Westminster, you know, reacting to us rather than dictating to us, is if we are in the face of the media every week. You know, we're putting out statements, we're putting out press releases. We're holding tight to what it is we've discussed and what we've agreed upon. So a citizens' assembly, well, doesn't matter what you think of it, it's better than the nothing that we have at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, we've got to get moving on it.
I don't mean to be negative about it, but you know, there isn't anything else. There's you, me, Iain up here, all blethering away to ourselves, you know, and and when we finish, nothing will have changed out there. A few more people might have said, I've just listened to that broadcast, and those chaps have said one or two interesting things I didn't know about.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. But that's
progress, Gareth. It's going to have to be incremental, and social media is important. Social media is not going away. And the more we can dominate social media, the more we can build our audiences, the more people that are going to get involved. I think that's the way ahead, because I've got no hopes that we're going to get any fair shakes from the media, the mainstream media in Scotland. I mean, Nicola's about to give them £9 million to stay on her side, so you can be sure.
Another tranche of money.
The price of silence against independence. It's 3 times higher now than it was for Alex Salmond. Before, it was 3 million to keep quiet about Alex Salmond. Now it's 9 million to keep quiet about GRA, self-ID, and MDL's talking about independence.
I mean, what do you say to something like that?
It's time for a taxpayer.
You shrug your shoulders, and think.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
what other folly does the SNP have up its sleeve, to prove to us that it's accommodating colonial.
Yeah, but to use taxpayers' money, I mean, it's completely undemocratic. I mean,
and there's
no
taxpayer
was given a say in
companies and newspapers and iScot magazine, for example, struggling to keep going. Not a penny.
Yeah, well, we're all blog sites where we don't ask for money. There's quite a few blog sites about these days where there's constant requests for money. We do it out of commitment to independence, and nobody needs to send me money for a house somewhere to keep carrying on what I'm doing. So I think
for that. But anyway, can we move on to some other things?
With a new car to get around, it's 25 years old.
well, here's your chance to get some we can talk about, because one of the reasons I've got you, apart from because it's always a pleasure, never a chore, Mr. Wardell, to have you in our company. It brings a bit of, I don't know, je ne sais quoi to the
absolutely
that I normally have to talk with. So it's lovely to have you. But you have a new book, young man.
I do.
Of essays. And as quick as you like, there's the old techie's got up your essays. It's marvellous stuff, and you're getting some rather good reviews on it, Gareth. Are you pleased with the end product?
Thank you. Yeah, and I honestly, hand on heart, I've bribed no one to get good reviews. In fact, I expected to wake up and find nothing but reviews from trolls, pretending they bought the book and saying, this is just a pile of bollocks. So, yeah, I've had to wait. I believe there's been 3-figure numbers in Kindle, which is the cheaper version, and easier to buy if you're abroad. That have been sold so far, and the hardback edition, which I have here, I will have this one copy. I'm waiting for a batch to send to people who wanted a signed copy. So anyway, when I got it, I read the preface and duly impressed with the quality of the prose, and decided I better stop there, because the rest could be a terrible anticlimax. It might fall away. You've got this paranoid fear. So I put the book down. I'm delighted with it. I actually wrote it because, as well as a few people saying, Gareth, don't close down your essay site, I wanted something just to hand to my daughters afterwards. They could take it off the bookshelf here and say, hey, our dad, you wrote all this stuff in here. Our dad really existed. It wasn't just on emails from Los Angeles.
No, it's good, Gareth, because I've been going through a little reading frenzy, recently of friends who have books published. I mean, Jim Sillars had his published, Campbell Martin had his published, and you've got yours published.
And you're working on one.
I'm working on one, but mine's fiction. It's not about politics. It's about the clearances and moving to America and things like that. But I hope to get it out sometime this year, but I'm not putting a date on it, you know. Good.
Does Sir Tom Devine know that he's got a competitor?
I don't think he needs to worry just yet.
Now, I managed to find his quotation and put that up on the social media when he said that DevoMax is just nonsense. It's designed not to work. It's designed not to answer. The only thing is full independence.
Yeah, it's delayed.
Yeah, a lot of things have been going on this week as well. I'd like to have a quick chat because we've got some time left, and I don't know what's happened to the old Coatbridge Cavalier. He's vanished. But anyway, this week, I don't know if I thought it was really quite disgusting, and I was really heart-salt. Not someone I've always agreed with their politics, but Andy Whightman, who I think has been tremendous, written. He too's written a very good book, and he's known better on land reform and issues like that. And he put out that heartfelt plea that he was struggling to get work, and there was a pile-on from the Young Green team, the Green members, which I thought was quite disgusting. Ian, did you see that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've read Andy Whiteman's book as well, The Poor Have No Lawyers. It's excellent. Yeah. I'd commend it to anyone who wants to find out about
I have a copy. Yeah.
About the history of land and how a lot of people acquired the land over the years. It's a very interesting book, and it's sad when you read that. But Andy's a talented guy. I'm sure there's work out there for him, and I hope if people have something they need done that involves a wide knowledge of land, then he's an ideal candidate, I would have thought.
The SNP are much quicker at giving our former opponents, editor of the Daily Record, giving him a full-time job.
Well, it's quite interesting.
Given somebody supported independence all his life.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that Nicola has on her panel of advisors the Duke of Buccleuch's factor rather than Andy Whiteman. I think it's a pretty clear signal. Land reform's nowhere near the top of the agenda.
And a guy from the Daily Mail as well.
The colonials, you start employing your old opponents and sycophants. You bring them in on the excuse that they're changed people. They had a road to Damascus moment. I don't know which part it was, but that's what they claim.
Well, I mean, it's quite.
The thing for Andy is it's very sad. I have no means to know what to do to help him, but he really ought to be offered something from somebody soon. That 9 million you're talking about, maybe they should give him a few, 100,000 to work on a new book.
Yeah, or to start advancing policies towards fair land reform. Or as a previous guest we had on this programme, Graham McCormick, who was arguing for annual ground rent, as a means of public funding. Andy would be an ideal guy, I would have thought, to be on a committee looking at how that could be properly organised.
That's a terrific idea, Ian. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was the pile-on from the Green members who were taking great delight in the fact that Andy couldn't get work. I found quite nauseating and vile. I just it's not these people.
Well, I mean, the SNP have got them as well. I mean,
but it's the same section. It's the same section. The GRA fanatics who are the same ones.
You can spot them on Twitter.
Vile.
It's always two lines. They don't. The capacity of Twitter's too big for them. They like the 2-line smear with no evidence, and off they go. But
there was another one that was getting some. I thought was terrible, getting piled on, and that was I put out a tweet, and I'll talk about the tweet that I put out, which said that the Police Scotland couldn't find the leak out the First Minister's office that leaked the Alex Salmond report to the Daily Record. They can't make up their mind if £600,000 missing out of the SNP accounts is a crime or not. They can't arrest any perjurers from the Alex Salmond trial, but they managed to put poor Margaret Ferrier into court for busting COVID restrictions. Yeah. I mean, it really, this is again, she's fallen foul of not being one of the in crowd, Ian.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're going to persecute people travelling when they know or suspect they've got COVID, you know, you wouldn't be able to move in the courts because there's loads of people do it, you know, not intentionally. Margaret Ferrier didn't do it intentionally. She was travelling home. That was her crime, you know. And from what I gather, I think you mentioned this, she had phoned the Whip's office in Parliament and they told her to come in to Parliament, even though she said she was feeling unwell.
She didn't have the result, apparently. That's an allegedly. I don't know. This I was told she wasn't feeling well, went for a test, and they said, no, you've got to come anyway. She went down. It's when she got to London, she got the result of her test. She went and asked the authorities, and said, well, you've got to go home. So she went home.
Yeah.
They maybe meant home in London, but she went home to Glasgow. If you're not well, what do you want to be?
She was just unlucky. I mean, Nicola must have had a wee wokey that wanted into the House of Commons and she had to create a vacancy. That's what it looks like to me.
Such a bad man. But if we could talk about another one, you being royalty, Prism royalty, Gareth, you definitely are royalty in here. Our friend Prince Andrew has been in the news because of the Ghislaine Maxwell, and it's actually caused a lot of headlines. Will Prince Andrew ever see the inside of an American court, Gareth? What do you think?
Well, that's a really interesting question.
It's a first time for everything.
I mean, the British state will and the monarchy will make sure as best as they can that he doesn't have to see the inside of an American court. But I don't think he's going to. Well, he hasn't got off scot-free. I think almost everybody knows that. What he's claiming he didn't do, they feel he did do.
Yeah, well, I mean,
So he's already had his judgment, but there'll be some agreement struck. Money will change hands, and names on lists will change hands.
Do you think the Americans will go to the same lengths as they went for Julian Assange to give him extra?
Not a chance.
I tend to agree with you there, Roddy. I don't think there's a chance either. But you'll have to be careful where he goes to, because I mean, they tried to get Julian Assange on false charges when he was in Sweden, and they were trying to get the Swedish government to extradite him and try him there. And of course, as it turned out subsequently, the whole set of allegations against him were put up by the security services of the United States, and it all fell apart, you know, at a later date. So, you know, I read Craig Murray's, I don't know if any of you have read it, I read his part 1 of his imprisonment in Sorting and found it quite moving, actually. And, you know, he's providing a quite good social service and describing what happened and how he was treated. And it was good that the prison officers came out of it well, not so much the prison authorities. And also he makes very, very valid points that the prisoners that are in there all know each other. They've all been in 5, 6, 7 times, and they all come from the same areas of Edinburgh, which tragically are the ones where poverty is at its highest, you know. So looking at our whole justice system in Scotland is definitely an urgent requirement of the first government that replaces Nicola Sturgeon, because there's quite significant changes needed in it in a whole range of different areas.
I wonder if Craig's got himself a prison tattoo. I must ask him next time I see him.
Somehow I do.
Yeah, don't see. The last thing I want to discuss, because the time is usually the clock's beating us. This new, you've maybe all heard, Gareth, this new site Getter, which was set up by a Trump aide because all the social conservatives and anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, nutters, conspiracy theorists were getting kicked off at Twitter. And so they set up their own, and a lot of people have gone to Stuart Campbell put out a thing, and a lot of people have gone, and other people, a lot of ladies have gone over there because they can say what they want about the trans issues without fear of being kicked off of the platform, which I think is good. But I just wanted to say, and I wanted to say it here, ladies, even though you can say anything you like there, remember that they can still come and get you for the things you say on there. The police can still knock on your door. You're not immune because you're on a different platform from Twitter. If you say those things that upset the trans zealots, they can still arrest you. Have you any intention, Gareth, of joining this new Getter platform?
None whatsoever. I call it gutter. It first of all, in practical terms, I can barely manage to keep hold of the Twitter site I've got. It has somebody said you'll gain more readers, and I said I've got 2.1 million average a month throughout the world, and it takes time to supervise a Twitter site so that it's a safe place for people to debate things without getting abuse or insulted or libeled, slurred. And secondly, the excuse that Campbell gave to entice people across there, that it offers more characters. You can say more things. Well, 90%, I would think 90% of what's on Twitter is absolute puerile, moronic banality. So to be given twice the space, just to be given twice the space to talk the same rubbish, I'm not interested in that either. But also because, as you said in your introduction, Roddy, that it's Trump's and QAnon's stronghold. I wouldn't want to go anywhere near that. It's bad enough people like our columnists in Scotland, Ian McWhirter being one of the main ones, calling Twitter now so toxic, he doesn't want to use it except to advertise his latest column. That's bad enough. So no, it doesn't interest me. I'm more interested in making light-hearted jokes about Stu Campbell's ability to say he wants no more of the independence cause. He mentioned 12 reasons, of which 2 were only necessary. One was he's 53, and he wants a life now, which I think is very understandable. You'll notice a lot of SNP MSPs felt the same thing when they retired before the last election. And the second reason he felt was that Nicola Sturgeon is never going to get us a referendum, let alone independence. And I wrote to him just so you know, to say that I thought he was right. He had done sterling work for the first 4 or 5 years in the site. His last year seemed to me to be overwrought and frenetic in the amount of blogs he was throwing out almost on a daily basis. The Stu Campbell I know is someone who is incredibly intense, but he can be as intense about telling us that Kezia Dugdale is a completely dishonourable, lying politician, as he can be about arguing why we shouldn't have pineapple on pizzas. So it seemed to me he had made the right decision, that we weren't going to get anywhere. He didn't feel obliged to carry on being Cool Hand Luke, eating stuff in his face with more eggs and cutting the heads off the top of parking meters. It was time for him to say goodbye. But when you say goodbye, that emphatically, make it goodbye. Work from the wings, if I can use that pun. By that I mean, by all means, help edit a new blue book for Alba. but just recreating what you've had before seems to me to be worthy of a bit of lampooning. I hope he's got a sense of humour, but I'm not altogether sure about that.
Oh, I wouldn't think so. Well, but you going to go together? Last word, Iain. Are you going to go together?
No, there's no chance of Paisley joining. We've all got together and decided that we're staying loyal to Twitter as it is. We won't be going.
It also splits public attention, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it's two audiences.
The public are just getting used to Twitter. People, what is Twitter? I think I'll join it. Oh, yeah, I've read one or two good things. I've made some good friends. And what's this other thing I've got to join now? If they're joining Gutter because you get to say more things, what was wrong with Twitter? What was wrong with keeping up your blogs? What is wrong with writing articles for the for newspapers?
It took me a long time, Gareth, to get convinced to join Twitter because I was always just operating in Facebook. And then since I've joined Twitter, I've gradually doing less and less and less on Facebook. It takes a lot of time. I'm sure you're aware of it, to maintain a blog on.
10 minutes goes by just answering somebody's.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you're getting thousands and thousands of readers, you're getting quite a lot of back and forth communication. It takes a long time. So I wouldn't be opening up another avenue, to get even more.
I'm sure Stu Campbell will make the most of it. But in time, Gutter will get the same impositions imposed on it from the American right as Twitter has.
I could maybe join it. I could maybe join.
Freedoms will get reduced.
I could maybe join it for the 6 months. I could maybe join for the 6 months I'm in America.
Yeah,
I would look like a local.
I have a theory that people who've made a reputation on social sites will be really loath to give that up.
Yeah, I agree.
That's where their reputation relies. Whereas people like myself who have had a reputation already and brought that expertise to a social site in order to try and promote independence are more likely to say, well, I've done as much as I can and it's time to go, and not really miss it. Maybe read it, but not really miss people saying, oh, that's a wonderful tweet you've written. You're such a wonderful person.
Gentlemen,
a lot of them don't say that about me.
No,
we've really overrun.
Because you look like a James Bond villain.
Do I look like a leading man? Gareth, can I be a leading man? If he's a villain, can I be a good guy?
You remind me of that squirrel in the cartoon that desperately tries to hold on to that acorn.
Yeah, you should never ever ask a question you don't know the answer to. that would be my advice.
I'm wounded I am. Right, chaps, thanks a lot. It's been great speaking to you again as always. I could sit here all night as always. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, ladies, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed talking to Chris and to my two good friends here. Until I see you again, you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.